The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. We'll be getting started very shortly. Welcome to the Prevailing Trends, How to Engage International Students in Admissions webinar. We are recording this webinar and will send out an email tomorrow with the slides and a recording. We have saved time for questions at the end. This webinar today is put on by Melissa King, who is the Vice President of Marketing at CollegeWeekLive. CollegeWeekLive's mission is to easily connect students with the colleges of their choice. Melissa started at CollegeWeekLive in 2010 and has helped to connect over 2 million students from all 50 states and 192 countries to colleges. Prior to CollegeWeekLive, Melissa worked at online advertising agencies, helping clients reach their acquisition goals through multiple channels, including affiliate, search engine, and email marketing. She holds an MBA and a BS from Providence College in Rhode Island and resides in Boston, Massachusetts. She is joined today by Tiffany, who is an international student advisor at Concordia University in St. Paul. She's been at Concordia for 2 years. The ISS office at Concordia works closely with international admissions. Concordia's international student population has grown from 4 students in 2013 to 143 students in 2015, largely through word of mouth, an armchair recruitment model, and a student-centered approach throughout the admissions process. I will hand it over to them. Thanks so much for joining us. Melissa, sorry to interrupt, but we have no sound from you. There you go. I can hear you now. Melissa, can you hear me? Okay, we should be all set.
Can everyone hear now? I can hear.
Yep, we're good. Thanks, Melissa. Sorry about that, everyone.
Yeah, thank you everyone for sticking with me. All right, I will just kind of quickly run through the agenda again. So welcome, I just wanted to go over what we'll be talking about, which is we'll be going through some research that we did with Ruffalo No Levitz that went out to prospective international students and asked them, what they were expecting throughout the enrollment process from colleges, how they wanted to interact with them, and kind of how they thought they were going to make their decision. And then we took it from another angle with EdgeVentures, where we surveyed those students after they had gone through the process and after they had made their decision this fall, and really compared, what were their expectations, were they met, and what were those key things that drove their final decision. And so we'll go through a few of those points. And as research is great, but we actually want to show you what schools are doing in action to recruit some of these international students and help them make that decision. So Tiffany has joined me from Concordia University at St. Paul to go through, one of their very innovative in international recruiting. So they'll kind of walk through their strategy, what they're doing, and the results that they're seeing. And then we'll go through some major takeaways and, leave time for any questions that you guys have. So just a little bit about CollegeWeekLive. We are driving online, live, and interactive engagement for colleges and students. So our real goal is to help you connect with the students and really have meaningful conversations with them. Students are online now these days more and more, and that's where they want to communicate. So we've made it possible that you can actually still have that real personal interaction, help them while still doing it all online and making it more convenient. Just a quick list of current clients that work with CollegeWeekLive, as well as some of our partners. We, especially on the international side, work with Education USA and the State Department and helping them, get students to interact with colleges throughout the year at different virtual events. So let's jump right into the first survey that we did with Ruffalo No Levitz. And this was over 2,700 students from 164 countries. And we really, like I said, this is the one where we're going to go into how do you meet their expectations? What were they looking for? Where do they want to communicate? And, what kind of information are they expecting from you? So, global representation on the survey. Top countries were, Canada, India, Pakistan, and Nigeria. And we had a good breakdown of undergraduate students as well as graduate students. So we'll break out some of the results to show the difference in the expectations and kind of the needs of those different groups. So a couple of questions that we kind of wanted to just throw out there and things that will be covered in the research. So if you guys want to kind of answer in the chat, just as we go in, what you think some of the most important and influential factors were for the undergraduate students in their decision. So I'll give you guys a minute to kind of type in some answers, and then when we get the results, we'll see how close you were. All right, so if everyone wants to type those into the chat box, we can definitely move on to the next expectation as well, which is, what do you see, or what do students see as their biggest obstacle to study outside of their home country? We'll take some answers there. All right, and then finally, just a quick guessing, number one, on what % of students do you actually think have used their mobile device to look at your website? And how important is that in the process? Okay, great. So now we'll dive right into the results. So when we asked what were their motivations and why do they want to study, what we saw overwhelming is that, a large percent already know in a university or universities that they're interested in studying. And so they are particularly focused on that school. And then we also, for the undergraduate side, they're looking for, they're already here. A good percent of the undergraduate students were actually studying high school and attending an international school, or already here with an ESL program. So they're, very interested in staying, and they already have the experience. So they are prime for getting their undergraduate degree. On the graduate side, the difference that we actually saw was that a lot of them actually know not just a university, but often a professor that they would be interested in working with and studying with. So that was, good to see that, putting out your faculty and getting them in front of students, they actually have an interest in meeting them. So while the last slide I talked about how, those students actually have a university in mind, when you look at how many did they actually plan to apply to, over 70% said that they were going to apply to 3 or more schools. So I think what we took away from this information is that while, a school may have piqued their interest and, gotten their motivation to study abroad, they are very open to applying to other schools and keeping that, they're just keeping an open mind and, making sure that they might not be going to the school they originally thought, but they absolutely still have that motivation to study abroad and study in the US. So then we went into some of those top concerns and kind of these biggest obstacles that you guys were talking about. And absolutely financial, like a lot of you said, were the top concern for both groups. So I think, across the survey and just kind of across the admissions process, absolutely funding is going to be a problem or a concern. So better to address it up front and, kind of make sure that you're aware of that. For most of these students going through the process, it is a concern. For the undergraduate students, I think, they are younger and more concerned with the fact that they're leaving their homes and their friends and their family. And they are, that's different than the graduate. So that concern, and especially with their parents, should definitely be addressed. Interesting that both have the concern around safety on campus and safety in the area. So these international students, even still at the graduate level, have that concern. And then the visa requirements, I think, was, standard across both. So what we took away from this one was really the difference in that, addressing the concern for undergraduate students in that, it's a different time in their life and they're at a different stage in the process and kind of their how comfortable they are. We then went into what is the most influential resources. And this is really important for where you guys need to present yourself to these students, because this is where they're looking. And number one across both groups was that your college website was the most influential place that they got information and where they planned on, learning about your program. Secondary, I think we see a lot of those college rankings, and international students very much pay attention to college rankings and whether they actually are going to be able to get into some of those top schools or not. They do certainly go out and look at those sites and spend a lot of time on them. So I think paying attention to where you are and how you're presented on those websites is really important, because that's where the international students are looking, and then going from those sites to your site as well. Something that we saw some growth in, and across the board, this isn't just international students, but certainly with US as well, is those social media posts. The international students are just as heavily weighing those and seeing those as influential. So your social media and making sure that that's geared towards international students and their concerns, and making sure the resources are available. Just don't forget them in those channels. So I think, you guys should absolutely be looking at how international student friendly is your website, and what kind of information are you presenting for them, and making sure that you're not just talking to your students in the US. When we talked about how many students view it on a mobile device, this number is again continuing to grow, and we saw with undergraduate students it was more than three-quarters of students said absolutely they went on your website through their phone. And same thing, graduate students was still a huge percentage. I think, this number, they said yes, they viewed it. One of the good things is they're still looking at it more often on the desktop than on the mobile. They said they viewed it, but if they're going back multiple times, it's often on the desktop. However, the growth in the mobile was up for the highest percentage. So it went from just 17% used it more often than the desktop 2 years ago, and now it's already at 38% for undergraduate students. So looking at your mobile website, and is it, how friendly is it for a mobile device? And something that, Google has actually noticed this trend as well. And so they've responded by they will penalize you in their search rankings if your site is not considered mobile friendly. So actually at the bottom of the slide on that URL, you can go in and put your site in, and they'll tell you your score and how you're doing. So something really important to look at, because if international students are searching for you, and when they're viewing you on your phone, you absolutely want to make sure that it's laid out easily for them, and the content that they're looking for is readily available. And so that will lead into what should be available, and what are those top areas that they're looking at. So I think across both groups, like we said, across the board, cost is going to be something that they're interested in. So making sure that that's really not buried on the site, especially if they're on their phone. You don't have as much time to catch their attention and to make them find the information that they're looking for. So you want to put it, right up front for them. The most content or popular content that students wanted to view was around those academic programs and the majors. So they're really interested, and a lot of them have an idea of what they'd like to study, and they want to make sure that you offer that for them. So absolutely, I think putting that, right up front and making sure that they can see that and get to the ones that they're looking for. After that, mostly the grad and undergrad stayed pretty similar. The international student services was more important to the grad students. But I think that's more, grad students have a little bit more of an idea of the admissions process. So these undergrad students really needed that information up front, whereas the grad students kind of knew the process and what would be expected of them. but now they wanted to know, okay, what else is available for me when I go through that? And then to look at what kind of came in lower, which isn't, surprising, is really the calendar of events, which when you think of it, most of the calendar of events is probably on-campus visits or on-campus events. So looking at that, it's not really of interest because most likely the international students are not going to be able to attend the campus events, as well as the athletic programs. Certainly they're much more involved in the academic programs and coming for that than any of the athletic programs. So this is just a good guide to help you kind of, what do I put up top? What do I make accessible versus, what should I not kind of distract them with when it's not going to be pertinent information that's going to help them make their decision and choose your school. So after we kind of talked about what kind of information do they want to see, we asked them, okay, how important is the communication process? What do you expect from schools? And, at what stage are you looking for the information? I don't think it's surprising, but I think it's really interesting to see that, they actually do expect to be communicated with throughout the process. So it's not just a matter of, getting them through that first stage and getting them to know what your school is. Even as they're applying and even after they've been accepted, they do expect a high level of communication, and they consider it extremely important. So I actually thought one of the most interesting points on this slide was that it only went up after they got accepted. And that's, the key point and the key time in helping you make that decision and turn them into that enrolled student, and making sure you're not forgetting them at that point because you've, got them in your application pool. We asked them where they would need support during the enrollment process. And, I think, again, like we've said, that cost and the financial decision is going to be important to them. So helping them know, what kind of aid they're going to have available, or what, the cost is and how they can afford that will be important, I think, throughout the process, even before when they're applying and they need that information up front. But then also, okay, they've been accepted. What does that really mean? And now you're down to that, okay, I'm breaking down the actual cost. So that will certainly be, a part of the whole process. And then if you look on the undergrad side, number 2 came in at writing the application essay. And I think, giving these students application help is something that they absolutely are really need. And they're looking for specific help from your school and what's different about you and what are you looking for in your application. So how does it help them, kind of present themselves and make sure that they are helping you make that decision as well. And then kind of the whole applying for the visa. I think obviously that is across the board, again, kind of goes along with the cost. It's always going to be a concern for those international students. But they are looking for that help on researching colleges. So even going back to, that first slide where they had that school in mind, they have one in mind, and that's kind of what got them motivated, but they're open to that research. So being there and supporting them during even the research process is important. So we then took it in terms of, okay, what online is influencing where students are going to attend? And with, meeting with the admissions reps and the college reps, a lot of the international students, they can't do that in person. And so it's really important that they still have a way to feel that, personal connection with the school and feel that, they actually have somebody there that can answer their questions. So, and besides meeting in person, because a lot of that is tough, they can still meet online and they can still kind of connect with those agents online, and they do consider that really important. I think in terms of videos, they're absolutely looking for videos on campus, to get them a feel. These students aren't going to make it for the campus visit, but they still want to make sure that this is the right fit for them and that they're going to fit in on campus. So any kind of virtual tour, college video presentation is really important. And then I think, they do obviously meet with the independent counselors and agents. But if you can see, that is less important to them. They want that one-on-one connection with the reps at your school. And then, when we looked at who do you want to interact with, certainly admissions reps, as well as current students. And I don't think we can stress the importance of interacting with some of the current students that have been through the process for them, and, giving them being able to ask the questions that you don't ask the admissions reps, and ask for the opinions of those current students. So I think both groups, would rate that as something that's important to interact with. We did ask them specifically, are you planning on visiting campus? Just, we obviously know that a lot of them cannot come, but, we wanted to actually say, okay, who's planning on it? And you can see, almost 60% of undergraduate students know right off the bat that they are not going to be able to make it to campus. And then even the ones that plan on seeing one or two schools, that 75% were applying to 3 or more. So odds are they are not going to make it to your campus to actually be able to use that as a tool for helping them make their decision. So I think, when we look at that, it is the whole, how do we give them that sense, and how do we get them online, or, getting them that information. One of the big pieces that we, kind of tend to forget is the parent influence on the student decision. So we actually have found that it's getting more influential than it is less. And I think, the international students, it's such a big decision. We talked about in the beginning with those undergraduate students that are really, concerned about leaving their family and friends. So their parents absolutely have a huge influence on them. And I think that making sure that you not only have the information available for the students, but you have it for the parents as well. And that you're not just interacting with the students, but making sure that that parent has all the information that they need. And maybe their concerns are a little bit different. They want the safety piece more. But, they certainly have the concerns that need to be addressed. So when we went into, the preferred communication channels and, okay, on this online or in person, what are the top ones? And, the email is number one, that they say they want to get that communication. And everybody knows, everybody's sending emails. But how do you actually break through the clutter of all of the emails that they're getting? So I think, in one way, yes, they're saying they want that communication, but, I'm sure when everyone looks at their open rates and their interaction rates from emails, it's not like they're able to respond to each one. So I think that's important to note that, it's not going anywhere. Email is absolutely sticking around, but making sure that you're able to stand out, and what are you doing uniquely? What kind of information are you providing them? And how are you engaging with them in those emails is really important. And then both groups also said that, meeting in person is going to be important, and, they have those in-person college fairs. So even if they're not coming to campus, they do want to see you at an in-person college fair. But especially on the grad side, rated just as highly is this instant messaging and the idea of chatting live with the students. And they want to be able to ask their questions online and get their answers immediately. And I think that goes along with the mobile piece. They're very, I have a question, I want to get it answered right now. So I think that is important to look at, as well as, they're open to this video interaction and to meeting at these virtual college fairs. I did want to note, texting is still not rated highly as their preferred channel method. However, when you look, we've been doing this survey for a couple of years now, so we have some year-over-year analysis. And when you look at the growth, texting actually does have the highest growth rate. So I think, in terms of future and where we're headed, and, students will become more and more comfortable with some of that more personal texting interaction. And then just in terms of, this virtual contact and, how important we think this is that when you look at the amount of students that are actually interested but haven't had the opportunity, it's such a large portion that I think it's really important to look at that and give those students the opportunity to connect virtually. So that's kind of what they were expecting or planned on doing during the process. Then we took a look at these same students after the process and after they'd been admitted. And you'll be happy to know I only have a couple of slides here because actually what we found was that a lot of the data was true. And what they said they were going to do, they did. They didn't visit campus. They absolutely interacted online, and they, used your website far more often than any channel. That's where they got most of their information from. So I just have two slides that we thought out of the results were really important. And when we asked the students who said they ended up not enrolling in a U.S. university, we asked them why. And, again, we knew cost was the biggest concern going in, and it ends up being the biggest reason that the students could not come. The other next reason was that they just couldn't do it this year. So I think it's good to know that, your pool of international students does not just stop after, they don't make that initial decision. You actually still have longer to engage them and keep them going and active in the process. But the one that I want to highlight the most is this one that they didn't know enough about the university to make a good decision. So 23% actually felt that they just didn't know enough to make that big decision and make the commitment to go. And that is something that I think, is a huge opportunity because they applied and, they really felt like they were far enough in the process, but when it came down to making the decision, they just didn't feel comfortable enough. So what can we do? Kind of, we know what information they're looking for. We know that they're interested in those programs, but how do we engage with them more? How do we find out that they don't know that they, we don't know that they don't have the decision-making information. So I think making sure that we're keeping them engaged throughout that process and where they're expecting that information, we can definitely narrow down this 23% and not make that a factor in why they didn't make their decision. And then again, just to point, the ones who said they didn't think that they were going to visit, 56% of students did not end up visiting the university that they enrolled in. So I think that's really important to look at the fact that, a lot of your international students are never going to make it to campus. So you're going to have to reach them in other ways and make sure that they have that sense of what their life is going to be like when they get to your school. So that's kind of all the data, and I thank you for sticking through it. And now I'd like to kind of hand it over to Tiffany to talk through exactly how Concordia University is putting some of this into practice.
Great, thanks, Melissa. So I am actually the International Student Advisor at Concordia University St. Paul, but our International Student Services Office has always worked really closely with the admissions office and with international admissions as well. So now I'll give you a little overview of Concordia University. So we are part of the Concordia University system. So we're affiliated with 10 other Concordia universities through the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. And right now we are at about 4,300 students, and 3% of our population is international. And right now our top sending countries are Saudi Arabia. We have a large SACM population of students on our campus, as well as students from South Korea and China. And by far our most popular majors have been business for the undergraduate students and education for our graduate students. And as far as international admissions, we recruit for undergraduate and graduate, and also help to manage the undergrad applications. And our recruitment so far has been more of an armchair model. We haven't done any international travel at this point, but we've done some domestic travel to get partnerships with language schools, and we've also found a small group of agents that have worked really well for us to get students, and then kind of from there, just the word of mouth has let our population really grow, and we have some exchanges that keep students coming into our school. So it's been working pretty well. And finally, our international admissions is also part of an enrollment management structure. So we're all pretty closely connected on our campus, and that's why we're able to work so closely together. And the international enrollment growth that we've experienced on our campus has kind of taken place in part of a larger enrollment growth that's happened on our campus. So Concordia University has actually doubled in size since 2005. And so the international growth we've experienced has just been a part of that. And here's the more detailed breakdown of the international student growth we've had. So starting in 2013, there were only actually 4 international students on our campus, and there wasn't even an Office of International Student Services. Just as the students were kind of applying and finding Concordia, they were just kind of helping them and working with them, but there was never any intentional international recruitment going on. So it was around that time that they started to decide to be really intentional about recruiting for international. And so this year in 2015, we hit 143 students. And this is one of our marketing slicks that shows our students are from 11 countries. This fall semester, we're really happy. We actually hit 14 countries. And as far as what we've used for online tools for recruitment, here's kind of a chart, kind of a breakdown of what we've done. Like a lot of other people, we're active on Facebook and social media. We've been using CollegeWeekLive as well. And so for those always-on events and international fair events, we actually have a student worker trained in the ISS office. He's a student worker from China, and we trained him on our admission process. And so he's in 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and he's able to do those always-on chats for us, which is great because then if any interested students from China are on, he's able to speak with them and really connect with them. And that's an area we're definitely looking to grow in on our campus. And we also have been finding good results with using Mailchimp campaigns to kind of promote any events that we have on CollegeWeekLive. And as well, in admissions, the admission counselor will use Google Hangout, Skype interview to kind of talk to applicants, just sort of reaching them in whatever way is possible and convenient for the student. And then in addition, kind of something we're hoping to look more into in the future would be having more private events with CollegeWeekLive. We have done a couple where we've been able to walk students through some things, but we definitely want to take more advantage of that in the future. And then we're also been looking into using Snapchat, WeChat, WhatsApp a bit more. We use these things a bit, but we're finding that our students lately especially love Snapchat. And then, of course, we know WeChat and WhatsApp is also very popular with students. So just continuing to look into ways to use those to engage with our students. So as I was saying, we found really good results with Mailchimp. And one of the reasons we really like it is because it's really mobile friendly. So as Melissa was saying, that's really important for students. So they're able to really view it really well on their phones. And so we found that to be really important. And another thing that we have really liked is that we're able to go into Mailchimp after sending it and seeing how many students are actually opening and reading those emails. And we're able to see where the students are at. So right here is just kind of an example of one of our campaigns we sent out about a CollegeWeekLive event we were having. And we were able to see where the students were at and sort of use this information to adjust our times for future events and just kind of see when do we need to be on to be engaging with students or not. And actually something was really interesting to us is that a lot of our students that were opening the emails were actually located inside the US. We kind of weren't expecting that at first. And then, as I was saying, with our online platform, we've been able to use this to have events and kind of walk students through the admission process all the way from application to receiving their I-20, and arriving on campus. And in the future, we definitely hope to use this more for events specifically targeted to students who might have a specific major interest or who are interested in talking specifically about finances and scholarship. And one thing that's worked really well for us is just having a link to our Apply Now button on our page. I don't think you can see it in this little screen right here, but we actually have that. So if students are on our page and liking what they're seeing, they're able to link really easily with our online application.
Great, thanks, Tiffany. So I think, in terms of some of the things that you guys are doing, the private events and just being able to keep that engagement, and like you said, having that Apply Now, really using the engagement piece to then drive those students further down the funnel, and making sure you can take them to the next step is important. Yeah. So I just wanted to go through another quick example of a school that has been kind of utilizing a lot of online engagement to recruit international students. And Miami University is a public university in Ohio, and they don't really have the application problem. They were getting lots of applications and lots of international student applications, but they were looking to kind of diversify some of their international students and just make sure that they were reaching them online where they wanted to be. So they still use a lot of offline tools. It's not that it's one or the other. It's certainly that combination piece that they're finding the most success with. So they're absolutely still going to high school visits and other receptions. They're going to counselor events, and they're still using print and email and search throughout. So they kind of, this is their offline or, besides the email piece that they do. And then when they look at their online piece, they're really using different tools at different stages of the funnel. So they're using social media, but they're not looking at it as really a way that they're getting a lot of new leads. They're looking at it as a way that they're going to, give those students that sense of their campus and what the culture is at their school. And so, they're aware that the students are there and they want that information. And then they do use the virtual fairs. They use that as lead gen as well as a way to continue to re-engage the students. They've used our private platform similar to what Concordia used. They actually had just 2 days ago, they actually had a great live event where they hosted chat sessions and they were able to answer any direct questions that the student had. And then they did 2 video presentations. And the first one was on the international admissions process. And so they were actually able to, walk them through the whole step-by-step. Where are they? Any, application questions, which they actually had a student who kind of said he had a Common App question. And it was great. It was a back and forth. And then he said, great, I'm going to send in my application. Thanks for answering that. So, they were able to really connect and have a meaningful interaction and get an application from a student. And then the other video that they did that I think is really is unique and important is that they had a panel of their current international students that were on campus. And it was all about, come talk to our students and ask your questions to them. So those students were able to kind of give their story and why they came to that school and what they found and anything they wish they had known ahead of time. So, you think even Miami University that's not having that problem with applicants, they really are trying to take those students through the next process. And after they do these, admissions ones in the next few months, they're going to switch over and they're going to start engaging those admitted students and try and help them with any questions that they need to make that final decision. So I think they really understand and are able to incorporate that offline piece with the online engagement and making sure that it's at all stages of the funnel. As you can see on the screen here, like I said, it's not even just yield. Once they're enrolled, making sure that especially the international students have so many questions about those visas and what kind of international student services are available, and making sure that you don't lose them over the summer period. And then this is just an example example of one of the private events that Miami has done, where they actually have broken out and really made an on-campus open house just online. And as we talked about the international students not being able to come, this is just growing and growing in popularity, and they're able to divide out the information and target. Students can go get exactly what they're looking for, and it's all online for them. So I think, as key takeaways, in terms of, what are the international students looking for and what should you guys be doing? So I think, key to remember that students are flexible in terms of where they're applying, and making sure that, you're not limiting yourself and you're out there in front of lots of different diverse students. Again, the international website content. I think this is, number definitely very high in the priority in terms of how do you get that content in front of them? Where do you present that? And, whether it's on your website specifically, other college search websites, when you're using, an engagement platform like CollegeWeekLive, what information are you presenting, and making sure that content is directed towards them? The mobile piece, making sure that you are available on a mobile phone, or that the technology that you're using is on a mobile phone. CollegeWeekLive absolutely sees a huge percentage, often over 40% of our audience is coming on the phone. And so making sure that we have the ability that students can actually easily ask a question and have a very user-friendly chat application, as well as watch those videos on their phone, is really important. And then I think the online interaction piece, that interacting with the admissions reps as well as the current students and other, faculty are really important influencers. And that was really key to helping students make their decision. Like we said, don't forget about the parents. Make sure that they're incorporated in your outreach strategy. Making sure that you're online, because the students aren't going to be able to come to campus. And then key piece is making sure you keep that communication throughout the process, and not ever thinking that, that student is done or doesn't need to interact with you any further. So we will open it up to questions.
Great. Thank you so much. And thank you again, everyone, for your patience as we got our technical difficulties figured out. The first question is, are there examples of what international students would like to see on a website?
We don't have the exact examples, but I think certainly we know the content in terms of those academic programs, and making sure what majors are available, what you're offering in terms of like study opportunities. That was the top thing that they were looking for, as well as the financial aid piece. That's the top points that we saw in the survey that students were interested in.
Okay, great. The next question, does the search penalty only apply to mobile or in general?
It applies in general.
Okay.
So Google is really forcing everyone to make sure that they're mobile optimized.
Okay, great. Next question. How accurately do these numbers represent the different demographics that apply for U.S. universities? For instance, what percentage of the students surveyed were Chinese or Indian?
So we have a high percentage of Indian. I will say that the Chinese audience, because it was surveyed through CollegeWeekLive's database, and China is not one of the top countries in our database, so it doesn't fully represent those. When we've gone out and recruited students for our site as well, we have found that a lot of colleges are looking for some of that diversification, and in the recruiting of China, a lot of them, the students are they have a little bit more help in going through the process and resources available to them. So we have often found that our database has grown in other countries, but India is absolutely a top one.
Okay. And our next question, what about phone calls? I didn't notice any stats about admissions office phone calls to students?
Tiffany, you can kind of speak to whether you guys do that. I know that when we asked in terms of preferred channels, phone calls they weren't the bottom, but they also did not make it to that like top 5 kind of preferential piece.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think what our admissions office tends to see the most is students emailing with questions, or especially students, if they're transfer students and they're already local, coming in and wanting to have that face-to-face conversation rather than that phone conversation. I think talking on the phone can be kind of challenging for students, so they just prefer a different option.
Great. Do we have any other questions? Okay, here's one more. How do we combat the complaint that students have of receiving an avalanche of informational emails? Studies indicate that the new generation of students are using email less and less.
I agree. And I think, what we need to do is make the messaging different and the call to action different. So I really think in being able to stand out and have some sort of, it's not just come visit my website, or it's not simply, here, schedule your on-campus visit. It's really making sure that those emails are valuable and that they, one, have content that they're interested in. Are you sending them the right videos, or, directing them to the right point? And are you offering, I think, some of that online engagement piece? So I think it's really trying to stand out. It's not just, hey, we're a top school, or here's, our standard profile. It's, putting that different content in there, because you're right. You think about all of these students, they're getting hit by a lot of schools at the same time. So making sure that you can stand out in that sense. And also, I think, we're going to be looking in terms of like that text messaging standing out. And as things progress with mobile apps for schools and being able to do push notifications, I think, we can't forget about email. And I think that it's still a huge driver, but keeping an eye out for those other channels that are up and coming, making sure your social media and all of that is engaging, knowing that students are going to be looking other places and maybe not always coming through the email channel as much.
Great. Well, I want to thank everyone again for your patience with our technical difficulties, and I want to say another thank you to Melissa and Tiffany for joining us today. I will be sending out the slides, and there will be a recording. You should receive that tomorrow. If you have any questions in the meantime, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We are here to help. But thank you again for spending an hour of your afternoon with us today, and watch for our next email coming up for the webinar in January. Thanks so much, guys. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.